The history of the Roman Empire is filled with figures whose deeds left an indelible mark, but few combine such contradictory and tragic traits as Gaius Messius Quintus Decius. This emperor is remembered for initiating the first empire-wide edict that led to widespread persecutions of Christians and Jews, thereby opening a new, dark chapter in the relationship between state and religion. However, his fate proved no less dramatic than his decrees, for he was the first Roman emperor whose life ended on the battlefield at the hands of a foreign enemy, an unprecedented event that foreshadowed future trials for the great power. When attempting to understand Decius's reign, as with most emperors of the 3rd century, it's crucial to acknowledge the significant limitations faced by researchers. Historical sources from that turbulent era are often incomplete, fragmented, and not always entirely reliable. This period, known as the crisis of the 3rd century, was a time of profound instability, which inevitably affected the quality and preservation of documentation. Therefore, any reconstruction of events related to his rule will inevitably be somewhat speculative, leaving room for conjecture and interpretation, which only adds to the mystique of his figure. Gaius Messius Quintus Decius's path to the pinnacle of power began in relatively humble circumstances. He was born around 200 AD in the small village of Budalia, located in Sirmium on the banks of the mighty Danube. Although his family was not widely known among Roman aristocratic circles, they possessed considerable wealth. It was this financial standing, rather than noble birth, that allowed him to secure a place in the prestigious Senate in Rome, opening doors to the highest echelons of imperial politics. His ascent from a provincial backwater to the center of a mighty empire demonstrated the dynamism of Roman society and the opportunities it offered even to those not from ancient patrician families. By the mid-240s, Decius already held the important position of governor in one of the Mosian provinces. This border region was constantly under threat of barbarian invasions, providing Decius with valuable experience in administration and military command under continuous tension. It was here, on the turbulent frontiers, that his leadership qualities and understanding of military strategy, which would later prove vital for the fate of Rome, were forged. In 248, as the Roman Empire was shaken by internal rebellions and relentless barbarian raids, Emperor Philip the Arab, overwhelmed by despair and fearing the complete disintegration of the state, made an unexpected offer to the Senate, to abdicate. However, it was at this critical moment that Gaius Messius Quintus Decius stepped onto the stage. With remarkable foresight and unwavering confidence, he persuaded Philip to remain in power, predicting that the numerous usurpers threatening the empire would soon fall at the hands of their own troops. This bold and accurate prediction, demonstrating Decius's deep understanding of the political and military situation, greatly impressed Philip. Inspired by such enthusiasm and foresight, the emperor immediately entrusted Decius with command of the troops dispatched against rebellions in Pannonia and Moesia, and also elevated him to the esteemed rank of consul. This was a decisive step in his career, paving the way to a summit that, as we know, would bring him both incredible power and a tragic end. Against the backdrop of general instability, the choice of Decius as a leader seemed highly advantageous. Being a native of the region, he possessed a deep understanding of its peculiarities. Moreover, his experience serving as governor in Moesia gave him first-hand knowledge of all the intricacies and difficulties of local life, as well as the complexities of regional politics, making him an especially suitable candidate for addressing pressing issues. Meanwhile, imperial stability was shaken by two significant rebellions. The first erupted in the provinces of Pannonia and Moesia, led by Pacacian, who had previously been entrusted with extended command over several provinces in that vast area. The second rebellious movement originated either in Cappadocia or Syria, under the leadership of Jotapian. However, Jotapian's uprising proved short-lived. He was killed by his own troops, which put an end to his claims. Decius, recognizing the gravity of the situation, headed to the Danubian frontier to confront Pacacian's forces. However, even before his arrival, discipline among Pacacian's rebellious troops vanished, and they lost all self-control. As a result of internal strife, Pacacian fell at the hands of his own soldiers. These same legionaries, wasting no time, promptly proclaimed Decius their new emperor and unanimously urged him to formally declare his rights to the throne and begin a decisive struggle against the reigning Emperor Philip. In June 249, Emperor Philip assembled his army to personally meet the new contender for the purple. In the decisive battle, which took place either in Verona in northern Italy or in Beroia in Macedonia, Philip suffered a crushing defeat and was killed, thereby definitively establishing Decius as the undisputed ruler. One of Decius's first and most significant acts as emperor was to adopt the honorary name of Trajan, a tribute to one of the most outstanding and revered emperors in Roman history. Throughout his reign, Trajan had proven himself an exceptional military commander, but beyond military successes, he also gained renown as a ruler whose civil administration enjoyed widespread popularity, precisely the kind of leadership the Roman state needed at that time. Decius's fate, unfortunately, unfolded differently, as he was unable to achieve the greatness of his illustrious predecessor. In the imperial capital, Rome, he ordered the construction of the magnificent baths of Decius, sprawling along the Aventine Hill. Also, after the devastating fire during Balbinus's reign, it was he who initiated the restoration of the famous Colosseum. However, perhaps Decius most clearly distinguished himself in the realm of religious policy. He set out to revive ancient Roman traditionalism, within which he restored the long-lost office of censor. Amidst the evident decline of the Roman state, the emperor likely sincerely believed that the ancient Roman gods had turned away from their people. To regain their favor and goodwill, numerous temples were restored, and Decius himself actively promoted a return to indigenous Roman rituals and virtues. Moreover, he issued an imperial edict obliging all inhabitants of the empire to offer sacrifices to the gods and strictly observe pagan rites, a demand that both Jews and Christians, since the time of Nero's reign, had consistently refused to obey. As a result of such disobedience, Jews and Christians, in the eyes of the authorities, were failing to do their part in securing divine favor, and thus they began to be considered traitors to the state. Although Christians were not directly ordered to renounce their faith, they were tortured and executed if they refused to demonstrate loyalty to the Roman state. Even the then Pope Fabian fell victim to these brutal persecutions. The Gothic War. In 250, under the leadership of their king Niva, the Goths once again launched a large-scale invasion of Roman lands. Their military forces were dispersed. One contingent advanced into the eastern part of Moesia, where they managed to besiege Marcianopolis. Niva himself, leading the main detachment, headed south, attacking the city of Novi in the same province of Moesia. However, the provincial governor, Trebonianus Gallus, was there and successfully defended the city, forcing Niva to continue further south to Nicopolis. This city was plundered and devastated, after which the Goths continued their march south before Emperor Decius could catch up with them. The barbarians managed to cross the mountain passes and break into Thrace. Decius did not delay in pursuing them, and after crossing into Thrace, he ordered his troops to set up camp near the city of Beroia. The Roman legionaries were exhausted after the difficult mountain crossing. Niva, skillfully taking advantage of the situation, launched a surprise attack on Decius's forces as they were constructing their camp. The Romans suffered a catastrophic defeat. The emperor miraculously escaped death, hastily mounting his horse and fleeing back to Moesia to unite with Gallus. There, they began forming a new army, gathering troop contingents stationed along the Danubian frontier. Meanwhile, Niva ravaged the lands of Thrace unhindered, and soon after, he united his forces with the Second Gothic army that was advancing from Marcianopolis, then headed to Philippopolis. Priscus, the provincial governor, was in Philippopolis. Upon receiving news of Decius's defeat, Priscus saw a favorable opportunity to seize the imperial throne for himself. He made an agreement with Niva, promising to help him deliver a crushing defeat to Decius and thus solidify his own position as emperor. Niva pretended to agree to this proposal, and Priscus led the Goths into Philippopolis. As soon as they were inside the city walls, Niva ordered his army to destroy Priscus and his men. Niva wintered in the city, continuing to devastate the surrounding lands. In the spring of 251, the Goths began their journey home, laden with their spoils. Decius, however, had formed a new army during the winter months, and as the Goths were returning home, he intercepted them. In the early stages of the Battle of Abritus, the Roman cavalry, under the command of Decius's son Herennius, was pursuing the Goths when Herennius was mortally wounded by an enemy projectile and died. Thus, Herennius became the first Roman emperor to fall in battle at the hands of a foreign enemy, as he held the position of co-emperor alongside his father. Niva skillfully lured the Romans into a nearby marsh, cleverly feigning a retreat. Decius recklessly fell for this ruse and led his legions into the boggy quagmire, where they were soon completely surrounded and ruthlessly annihilated. Decius himself fell bravely during this battle, and the surviving troops immediately elevated the governor of Moesia, Trebonianus Gallus, to the throne, proclaiming him emperor of Rome, while Decius's younger son, Hostilian, still held the status of Caesar in Rome. Concluding thoughts. The death of Emperor Decius and the crushing defeat by the Goths plunged the empire into deep turmoil. Such a tragedy was unprecedented. No Roman ruler before him had met his end in battle against foreign adversaries. Followers of the Christian faith, who had been persecuted, rejoiced at his demise, seeing it as just divine retribution for the persecutions he had instigated. However, before passing too harsh a judgment on his actions, it is necessary to consider the historical context of these persecutions. From a Roman perspective, Christians who refused to comply with demands considered vital for the well-being of the state were perceived as undeniable traitors, directly threatening the security of the entire empire. Emperor Decius, it seems, held extremely traditional views, and his reign was aimed at restoring state stability after a long period of upheavals. On the coins minted during his rule, he depicted images of the greatest rulers of antiquity and even adopted the name Trajan, thereby seeking to revive the former glory and grandeur of the Roman state.